Shift your weight forward, keep the hips high, curl it in, kick the heel forward. Hey everyone, welcome to class and welcome to this tutorial. One of the questions I get really often is, from down dog, when you're stepping through, why does I feel like my legs are too long? Like I can't get or my torso is too short, or my arms are too short, and I can't get my leg to come all the way through like you, or like fill in the blank. And the problem is very unlikely to be the length of your arms or legs or torso. If you have exceptionally long legs or very short arms, it could be slightly more, you might have to adapt a little bit differently. But trust me, that's probably not the case for most of you. So what we're going to do is I'll show you where I think a lot of you are getting hung up, why it's becoming a little bit of a problem, and then how you can tweak it so that you can actually step through a little bit more smoothly. And if you can't step through smoothly, how to kind of modify that so that you can move quicker in your vinyasa and not feel like you're moving too slow, if that makes sense. So let's do this together. Here's what happens, I think, when you're coming from down dog. So here's how I would step through to whatever, right? Feels pretty smooth, but a lot of us, what ends up happening is we try to step through and we get stuck somewhere around here, right? So you're coming from your down dog and you try to step through and you feel like you can't get your foot that high. But what I notice if I slow this way down is when I step through, I pull my hips up pretty high, I hug my knee in super close, and I kick my foot forward. So I can bring my foot all the way through. That does require a fair amount of flexibility and core strength. So that said, if I slow down the other version where your leg isn't coming all the way through, what typically is happening is you're dragging your hips too far down, so you can't pull this knee in very close, and you certainly can't kick your foot up towards the hands. So of course, if your hips are very low, you're only going to get about this far, right? So already, that's one thing that you want to pay attention to, is how low are your hips? Are you sort of dragging your hips straight up, or are you lifting them and pulling the core in so that you have room to accommodate that knee into the chest? Does that make sense? So let's see. So if I tweak that a little bit, so let's say I'm having trouble because I can't get my foot high enough. Well, my hips are pretty low here. So now what I'm going to do is, from my down dog, keep my hips a little bit higher and squeeze my knee in towards my chest so that I can pull my knee in closer. And if you think of it as a crunch, if you think of it as crunching the ribs toward the pelvis and hugging the knee in super, super tight to the chest, that might help. So try doing that first from your down dog. Let's use the right leg as an example. You're going to shift your weight forward, keep the hips a little higher, squeeze, 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 and then kick the heel forward. So already a little bit easier, right? Now let's say your core isn't very strong and you don't feel like you can make that shape. In that case, I would suggest making a pretty similar shape. So from your down dog, keeping your hips high. You don't have to hug the knee in really close. You can sort of move your hand as you step it up. So while you're working on improving your core strength, you can cheat it a little bit by keeping the hips high and moving your hand out of the way so that you can accommodate that. So I'm not really using my core here, keeping my hips high and just bringing my foot forward. So that's a way to, like I said, cheat the system a little bit so you don't have to use your core as much. You can work on your strength while still being able to flow a little bit more smoothly. So come back to your down dog. Take a couple breaths here. We're going to step through once on each side. So let's stretch the right leg up. Shift it forward. Try to use your core. Don't let the hips sag too far down. Kick the heel forward. Step it down. Warrior one. Circle the hands around. Step back. Down dog again. Let's do the left side. Inhale, left leg lifts. Shift your weight forward. Keep the hips high. Curl it in, kick the heel forward. Right heel down. Warrior one. Circle it around. One more little modification for you. You can come down to your knees. So let's say either way, maybe you're just starting your yoga practice or you're coming off of an injury or something, and that step through just still isn't really happening. It doesn't matter. So that's the first thing I want you to know. I should have started with that, is that it doesn't matter. The step through and smoothing it out is really just to, honestly, it's sort of like a aesthetic thing, you know? It doesn't really enhance your practice other than it smooths things out and you don't have to think about it so much. Kind of allows you to go into autopilot, but it's not something that you absolutely have to master. But if it's something that you can't really do right now for whatever reason, what I like to do is, if your foot ends up landing here, just pick up your hand and help it along. And that doesn't have to take a bunch of time, you know? That's like less than a second. Step forward, help it up, right? So don't worry, don't let yourself get obsessed with perfecting this right off the bat. It does take some time to master, to smooth out your flow. When I first started doing yoga, I was so behind. Like in my classes, I couldn't do a chaturanga, I couldn't hold warrior two for like any amount of time. And that step through was not smooth. It was not pretty. So these things, even though we see them all the time, like a step through from down dog, it is something that can take a little bit of time to really smooth out, to really make look pretty and Instagram worthy and all of that I know that we shouldn't care about, but we do. So be patient with yourself, practice, modify as you need to. And I think the biggest takeaway from this one is not to let your hips sag too far down. So if you're coming through from down dog, keep the hips a little bit higher than you think you need to, especially when you're starting out, and use your core strength to hug that knee in toward the chest, kick the heel forward, and step it through. So I hope this helps. Let me know if there's other tutorials, other poses or transitions that you want to help improve in your practice, and I'll do some videos for those too. Thanks for joining me. Namaste. And as usual, if you want more things like this, where I send all of my yoga tips, resources, tricks, coupons, everything like that, head to badyogi.com/free stuff. I'll link to that in the description below. Thank you so much again for joining me. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you right back here next time.